The ending for Spider-Man 2 teases a lot of new content, from story teases for potential DLC to setting up the next game's plot and even more spin-off games. In order to talk about this, I need to get into heavy main and side content spoilers, so if you haven't completed the game yet, save this video for later. But if you have, let's talk about what exactly happened in the ending cutscenes for the main game. So the first big tease the ending delivers comes from Norman Osborn. Heartbroken that his son Harry is in a coma, he makes a call telling someone to get the G serum ready ASAP. Which is of course setting up his transformation into a proper supervillain, as this strength enhancing serum sends Norman into insanity and eventually turns him into the Green Goblin. And I think much like the first Spider-Man game teasing the Venom symbiote at the end to set up the next game, Norman is going to play a huge part in a potential third entry. I think he is the perfect fit, especially if you look at the other main villains we've seen so far. While although Octavius posed less of a physical threat, his intelligence is what made him a terrifying opponent. Venom is the exact opposite, an alien intelligence that simply seeks to spread and challenges Spider-Man with overwhelming strength. And then presumably we end with Norman, the Green Goblin, who has acquired super strength thanks to the G serum, and it has also turned what was already a brilliant businessman even smarter. So a threat to both Peter's smarts and strength, plus of course the personal connection they share thanks to Norman's son Harry. Which, let's not forget, means that Norman already despises the Spider-Man, so even before he goes insane and turns into the Goblin, he's already planning to take them down. And you can see the first step of his plan in another one of the ending scenes as he goes to visit Otto Octavius on the raft. Norman wants to learn the identity of both Spider-Man from Otto, who is busy writing something he refers to as the final chapter, hinting at his return as an active villain. Now there is a comic also called the final chapter, which I don't think is relevant here. Maybe it hints at the fact that the third game will be the last one. Of course, if you have an idea on what he's planning, I'm curious to read about it in the comments. But yeah, I think we are in for an epic opening for the third game. With the ending of 2 also setting up that Peter wants to take a step back from being Spider-Man, I think it's going to be a rude awakening for him when Norman / the Green Goblin and Doc Ock target him personally and pull him back in. And the potential cast of villains for the next game is even bigger, but before we discuss those, let's actually talk about our newest potential ally, Cindy Moon. She's introduced in the post-credits scene where she shows up with her dad at Miles' place with no face revealed yet. Which is probably for the best, as Harry's VA and face model were also changed between the first and second games. But yeah, I immediately jumped on Google after hitting the ending, and turns out that Cindy Moon is another Spider-Person who goes by the alias of Silk. The main thing that would set her apart from Miles and Peter is that she is not as strong but much more agile, and her spider sense is way more developed than the other two. There's also the fact that she's bitten by the same spider as Peter, which causes an, let's say, interesting dynamic between the two. Because they were bitten by the same spider, Cindy and Peter immediately become very attracted to each other. I personally hope this is not included. I can do without the MJ drama that would cause. And I also believe there will be more than enough problems to focus on in the next game. Although we of course don't know if Insomniac is sticking with that part of the story at all. Either way, much like at the end of the first game when a new Spider-Person is introduced, it does of course make sense to give them their own standalone title and properly introduce the character and their powers. Considering Miles' standalone endeavor sold 4.1 million copies less than 2 months after launch, I think it's safe to say these games are profitable as well, which means we definitely could see a Silk game in between 2 and the next major entry. Although we have to keep in mind that Miles had already been properly introduced by the end of the first game and got even more character building and teases in the DLC. Now we don't have confirmation on any DLC for Spidey 2 yet, but there is a side quest in the game that foreshadows the appearance of another villain that I think would make perfect sense for a DLC. We'll touch on that and way more. Of course, leave a like if you are hyped for more Insomniac Spider-Man content, and subscribe to not miss our next Spidey video. Okay, so at the end of the Flame side quest for Peter, you are confronted face to face with the leader of the Flame cult as he steals a symbiote from Oscorp. And well, he kind of already introduces his villain alias himself.
Carnage.
After the mission, Yuri will also confirm that the man is indeed Cletus Cassidy, who becomes host to the dangerous symbiote Carnage. Yuri says the investigation to find him could take months or even years, but if I'm being honest, I think that could change. Because while he planned to steal the symbiote pretty well, once he actually bonds with it, it could very well change his personality into something much more violent and sporadic, like we saw with both Peter and Harry. So you would think that he starts leaving some very clear tracks after that, making it easier for Yuri to track him down. Alternatively, maybe the months to even years mention is there to let us know that it will be a while before we get to fight him in future content. I personally hope it will be DLC though that starts with a new wave of symbiote attacks, of course now led by a mysterious new red symbiote. I also think it makes more sense to keep the Venom stuff tied to just one game, as it might overcomplicate the plot of any future titles, especially if we already have Doc Ock and the Green Goblin as main antagonists in part 3. So I hope Carnage gets the same treatment as Hammerhead did in The City That Never Sleeps, for example, which will also wrap up all the current symbiote stories, so we have kind of a clean slate when we go into the third game. Although who knows, there are many directions in which Insomniac can take this story. There is a storyline where Miles becomes infected with a Carnage symbiote, which is what the Absolute Carnage suit in the game is based on, and one where Norman steals it and becomes the Red Goblin. There is even the potential that the symbiote story becomes much bigger if we look at some of the evidence in Dr. Connors' lab, who was of course the first to find and research the meteorite that carried the Venom symbiote. If we take a look at his drawings, we see a recurring symbol that also appears on the head of each symbiote in the game. And this spiral means the symbiote is affiliated with Null, the god of symbiotes. He's kind of a big deal in the Marvel comics, as he was chosen to be the King in Black to keep balance in the universe. But instead, Null decided to kill the Celestials who came to him with this offer and created the symbiotes to wage war against them. So while it seems like the symbiotes in Spider-Man 2 answer to Venom, this symbol suggests that Venom himself might even serve a higher power. There's not much more we can learn from Connors' notes aside from speculation, plus the fact that the meteor also shows this red spiral design. And while Brian Intihar did tease that the next game in the series would be even bigger, I don't think fighting a god of darkness is what he meant. If anything, I think a potential connection to Null is best left explored in a standalone Venom game, which might be more likely than you think, as they did of course make him playable for a very small section of the game. Senior narrative director John Paquette also said in an interview with Insider that Insomniac is open to the idea of a standalone Venom game if it's what the fans really want. I personally think that will be the perfect way to continue the symbiote storyline as its own thing, with the only remaining question then being who becomes the new Venom. If you have any theories on that, feel free to share them in the comments. Now, I already mentioned Carnage, but there is of course another side quest that teases the arrival of a new villain. If you complete all the unidentified targets, so the bird drones you have to chase down, you will eventually learn that Kraven was looking for Dmitry Smerdyakov, aka Chameleon, who was also his half-brother. And while he might lack the brute strength Kraven has on display, he is a much more cunning foe thanks to his ability to impersonate and look like pretty much anybody. Not a big threat on his own, mind you, but we do of course have to keep in mind that the first iteration of the Sinister Six is running very short on members. Vulture, Electro, Scorpion and presumably even Rhino are dead. Lee has seemingly lost his powers after freeing Peter from the symbiote, which means that the only remaining active member is Otto. So I think high chance part of his final chapter involves looking for some like-minded supervillains, and we already know Norman Osborn is on that list. But in the final scene after leaving Chameleon's apartment, we see him staring at Spider-Man, saying that he will do what his brother could not, which of course means he wants to kill Spidey. And like I said earlier, on his own Chameleon's powers aren't that scary. But if someone like that is being put to use by Norman and Otto, let's just say we shouldn't trust anyone. That still only makes 3 of course, and if Carnage does not get his own DLC, he could make 4. If you have some good guesses as to who could round out that roster of villains, be sure to let us know in the comments. And while Spider-Man 2 sets up a lot for the future of Insomniac Spider-Man, it might also include a tease for another piece of Spider-Man media. I think a lot of you will have called that the Spider-Bots that appear as collectibles are in some way tied to the Spider-Verse movies, but there is a bit more to it than that. If you collect all of them, you receive a final location where a mysterious portal opens up in a wall. The other side shows a bar with a woman, Delilah, who collects the Spider-Bots from you and ends with the line, "If Miguel comes looking for these, tell him finders keepers." So for one, that confirms the connection to Miguel O'Hara from the Spider-Verse movies, but I'd argue that this this mysterious Delilah is actually even more interesting. She is a cut character from across the Spider-Verse who was supposed to run the Bar with No Name, a gathering place for villains. Which we of course did not see in that movie, but especially with this cameo in Spidey 2, I'm pretty sure she will show up in Beyond the Spider-Verse. So I think we got our first tease at the movie cleverly hidden in a Spider-Man video game, just like Spidey 2 footage was teased in Across the Spider-Verse. And who knows, maybe this connection goes both ways, as using the multiverse of course allows for much more creative freedom when it comes to designing environments. As much as I enjoy swinging around New York, it does get samey after a couple of hours. And we know Insomniac has the tech to pull you from one world into the next in the blink of an eye, as displayed during the Black Cat mission and of course Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. So I can definitely see some multiversal madness being part of a third major Spider-Man game. Again, if you have any theories on these ending teases, let us know in the comments. And if you made some photo mode shots you're proud of, be sure to drop them in our Discord, which will be linked in the pinned comment. At the end of each video, our editor and photo mode expert Joyce will highlight some of our favorites, so Joyce, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks Dennis. How's it going everyone? The first one is from Epic, who took this picture where Miles does his own stunts with a stunning view of the city in the background. We've also got Zunkar, where Peter is taking on a symbiote while using the iron arms. Looks very sharp with this point of view, including the black webs behind him. And my absolute favorite of the bunch is from Call Me Ali, who took Venom for a spin in the photo mode with this amazing action shot. Damn, they can pose now, can't they? Going to try this out for myself too.
Thanks Joyce, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and if you want, you can watch our previous one on some amazing Easter eggs in the city by clicking on the screen. I will see you in the next one, goodbye.
Bye!